Hello, everyone. This is Mary McConnell-Smith. I'm just checking in with you. Please subscribe to my channel. Um, and I really appreciate each and every one of you subscribing and viewing my videos. Later this week, I'm going to brainstorm with a couple of other people to try to make my videos more exciting, more relevant. Like I said, if you have anything that you would like to discuss, please leave a comment. I wanted to get with you today just to talk about a little bit about my growing up, so you could understand a little bit where I'm coming from. Like I said, when I was younger, my parents got divorced. I was 10 or 11. Then my dad left for a year or two, I think just to wrap his head around what had gone on. We stayed, my brothers and I stayed with my mother in the home that we shared with my dad. And it was pretty typical. My mom at that time had gone to work for the federal government. And by that time, we were old enough to get up and get ourselves off to school, and we would come home. And we had a couple of dogs. They were basset hounds. We had Sophie, and we had Cleo. Not at the same time. We had Cleo first. Her name was Cleopatra, but we called her Cleo. She passed away, and then we got from somebody else Sophie. And and then we had a cat. His name was Sammy. His real name was Black Sambo, after the book Little Black Sambo. He was a crazy cat. He was a tomcat. Of course, back then, there wasn't much talk about, oh, you've got to get your cats neutered and spayed, and none of that kind of stuff. And so he was a tomcat, and he probably weighed about 25 pounds, and he was all black. He had a white nose, 4 white paws, and a white belly. And everywhere you went in our neighborhood, there was always little black and white kittens. I remember one time one of the neighbors, I didn't know him personally, had come over and said that our cat had attacked his dog. And, he was very upset about it. But, oh well, kind of, excuse me, I'm still getting over my allergy cough. But anyway, it was pretty typical. Our growing up was what it was, and, I guess I was probably about 13. My dad had gotten a girlfriend. Her name was Carol Lissa. My mom had gotten a boyfriend. His name was Ron. He was, I don't know, 6 something, and he worked for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I'm not sure. I think he was like the boss of the people that deliver the papers. I know he did some, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what his role was with the Star-Telegram. I just know that he worked for them. So we, it's typical growing up. my, I mean, it was just, anyway. I mean, it is what it was, and, I mean, there was, like, some crazy stories, but, my, when I turned 18, I, went and stayed with my dad for the summer. At that time, he was living in Houston, and he was a manager over this. His company had asked him to go to Houston to straighten out this facility where they made rollers for printing presses. So he did that. My middle brother, well, I mean, I guess the middle child, I guess when he was about 12 or 13, him and my mother had gotten in a horrific fight. My brother left the house, and he ran next door, and he called my dad. My dad came to pick him up. Then my brother went to go live with my dad, and he was still living with my dad there in Houston. So I stayed with them for that summer, and then I went and moved with my grandparents, my dad's mom and dad, and I stayed there. And then I did back then they didn't have online college, so I did like a correspondence college course with Texas Tech University. So I did that, and that is when I met my ex-husband. And at that time, my granny, she did own a beauty shop downtown, but they had closed the building, or I don't know, they were doing some remodeling or something, I don't know. And so anyway, she decided to close her shop downtown, and she remodeled her basement into a beauty shop and just had the ladies come to her beauty shop in her basement at her house. And so my granny did that. My grandpa had owned a bulldozer and some other heavy machinery, and he did, he did various construction things for in and around the town in which they lived. And he had retired. He was retired. He retired when I was young. But my granny still did her little patrons every week down in the basement. And so I stayed with my grandparents. It was nice. I went to work at the hospital there in the town in which they lived, the local hospital. And I started off at, I worked in the admissions office. I did various things. I worked in the admissions office. I worked what they call the PBX. It's where you basically answer the phone, and whoever's calling into the hospital, I need to speak to so and so, and then you would transfer them to that person or whatever department that they were needing. And then I would I think it was every other Friday, they would have of course, back then they didn't have direct deposit or anything like that, so everybody had to get a check. So I was the person that handed out the paychecks to people. They'd come up and they'd give their name, and I would look through this little file and pull out their check and give it to them. But like I said, I met my my ex-husband during that time working at the hospital. And he kept asking me to get married, and and I was very young, 18, 19. And I was like, no, no, and he kept wanting to go out with me, and I was just like, no, no, and he was very sweet. He was a very nice guy. Uh, Once or twice a week, I did work the overnight shift, and he was the security guard there at the hospital, and he would go start my car up, or before I would have to go out to the parking lot, and when it was cold, and so when I would get in the car, it'd be nice and warm, which that was sweet. I would go to the cafeteria to get something to eat, and they would tell me, oh, he's already paid for it, so you don't have to worry about paying for your lunch. That was sweet as well. Excuse me. And I mean, it was just, he was a very all around nice guy, very sweet, very caring. Um, but I really wasn't interested in really dating anybody at that time. I just wanted to be free, and but anyway, then my granny, she encouraged me to go to beauty school, so I started going to beauty school, and so I went to beauty school for 9 months, and I got my cosmetology license. And during that time, my ex-husband was sending me flowers like every week, and he had also at that time he had joined the Air Force, and he was in the Air Force, and then he would call me every once in a while, when he not when he was in basic training, but when he got out to go to his tech school. And his tech school also was in San Antonio as well as basic training. And he would call me he'd call me once or twice just to see how I was doing, which was nice, And then he got out of basic training and tech school, and he got stationed at Tinker Air Force Base, which was not terribly far from where my grandparents were living. And he would come down. I think he worked like 10 days straight, and then he would have 3 days off. I believe, if I remember correctly, that's the way his schedule was. So he worked 10 days straight and have 3 days off. And during those 3 days, he would come to the city where my grandparents lived, and he would, his parents also lived. Not in the same city, but in a smaller town right outside the city which my grandparents lived. And so he would, kill two birds with one stone. He'd visit his parents, and then he would come visit me. Again, which was nice and sweet. And he would ask me, I really would like to pursue this relationship. I really would like to get to know you better. I really would like to date you. I really, and I wasn't like terribly excited about it. I was just like, okay. And then he started talking about, well, I'm in the service and I can provide you security. And I got to really thinking, well, yeah, he is in the service, and, that's a good job. And it is true. I would have security, and we would have security. So, that's the way that went. And eventually he asked me to get married, and eventually I said yes. And then it was like maybe a couple of weeks later, we went down to the Justice of the Peace in the town where my grandparents lived, and we got married. I didn't tell my grandparents at the time that we were getting married because I was afraid to. And but they had this, their little town paper was, it was so small that once a week they had this section in the paper that said who had gotten married, who'd gotten divorced, who did a breaking and entering, and who did all these little petty crimes. There was just like this little section in the newspaper. Well, anyway, I didn't even know that there was that section in the paper, and my granny asked me one day, "Oh, did you?" And I don't really want to say any names because I don't want to, did y'all get married? And I was just like, oh my God. Yes, we got married. But, oh, then, Lord have mercy, And then, so, my grandparents were like, okay, what can we do? It's already done. So, I finished cosmetology school, and then once I finished cosmetology school, then I moved to Oklahoma City, where Tinker Air Force Base is, and we got an apartment, a small apartment, close to the base, and then we lived there, and I guess we were married for almost a year, and my husband and his mother especially were talking, oh, I would love to have grandbaby, when am I going to get a grandbaby, when am I going to get a but it seemed to me like it was like every 5 minutes, when are we going to get a grandbaby. So I guess we were married about a year. I said, I finally gave in, like, okay, we'll have a baby. So I had gotten, gotten pregnant, and I thought everything was fine, everything was great, and then, my husband and I, if anybody has been married, before, that the first year of marriage, or the first year you live with somebody, is usually the hardest, because you're always like bumping heads about something or someone, or whatever situation's going on, you have these little disagreements. Well, I remember I'd cooked a pot roast and all the fixings, and I don't remember what we had an argument about, and we had an argument. It was right around having dinner. And then I think that night he had to go to work, or maybe the next morning. I don't remember how soon afterwards he went to work. I believe, if I remember correctly, he had to go to work pretty soon after dinner. And so later on, when I went to the restroom, I noticed that I was bleeding. Well, I was like, oh my goodness. I was young. I think I was like 20, 21. And I was young. My parents never discussed the birds and the bees, or, nobody ever told me about how, your body worked, how pregnancy worked. There wasn't any Google, there wasn't any cell phones, no computers, nothing, and so what you know is what you knew, unless you went to the library and checked out a book, or you went to a bookstore and bought a book and read about it. You just didn't know. So I didn't know what was going on, I just knew that I had started bleeding, and it was like a heavy flow period, not like spotting, not like anything like that. So I got scared, because I knew that that wasn't good. So I called my husband and I said, hey, look, this is what's happening. He came home, he picked me up, we went to the hospital. They put me in the hospital. They put me in this room by myself. And then there I stayed. And, well, at first they put me in this room with like, I don't know, 5 or 6 other ladies. I believe that they had just given birth or, And I got upset and I said, I don't want to be in here. I don't want to be in this room with, this huge, like, room and have, like, all these ladies. So I threw a little hissy fit and they put me in a room by myself. So I was there and I was there overnight, and then the next morning I was still spotting, and I got up to go to the restroom, and when I went to wipe myself, I saw this little fetus on my toilet paper. It was like a miniature baby, and that was quite upsetting. So I called the nurse, and so that was that. So then everything was fine. The doctor checked me, everything was good, and then I went home. So more to continue next week, but the doctor said in a few months we could try again. So we tried again, and then that's when I got pregnant with my oldest child, my lovely daughter, and so more next week about that. But please like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell whoever. Like I said, later this week I'm going to be brainstorming and to come up with some more ideas, some more things to make my YouTube channel better. Like I said, if you have any thoughts or ideas, please make a comment so I can see about that. So thank you and have a good day.